The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya, and I'm thrilled to be here with you because this is the time I spend with you, and I love it. So for all of you, my heartfelt thank you for getting our books, whether it is Expert to Influencer or The Entrepreneur's Garden or of any of our other books, because partial profits go towards helping other entrepreneurs across the globe. And I am so thankful to you because it's important to bring about change in today's world. And who can do that? Entrepreneurs do that the best. And I'm not saying nobody else does it. I'm a little partial, folks, because I'm an entrepreneur. So I invite you to get your book because remember, regardless of where you are at, no matter where you are an expert, it's important to become that influencer. And to me, an influencer is someone who creates a lasting change, a lasting impact on other people's lives and adds value and makes a difference. So folks, either of the books, you're not going to go wrong. It's going to enhance your life and enhance somebody else's life. I cannot do it alone. So let's do it together. Another thing that I'm going to share with you is I invite you to spend just 1 hour of your time every month to help somebody with no strings attached. Let's get this circle of kindness going because, folks, it is important. All right, folks, let's invite our guests in. Welcome, Dr. Frank Douglas.
Welcome, and thank you for inviting me to the show and giving me an opportunity also to interact with your audience.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So tell us then, does any memory or a person stand out for you from your childhood?
Yes, there is actually a sad but important memory when I was about 12. I used to have every Saturday morning, it was my job to go to the market. And it was about a mile walk, and getting to the market was not a problem, but returning with a basket of goods, walking a mile was a problem. And finally, I actually got a bicycle. And this Saturday morning, was the first morning I was going to be able to actually ride to the market. So I rode to the market, I got the goods, I put it on the bicycle handle, and came riding back. And before I could think about it, as I turned into the yard, as we would call it, where I lived, it was sandy, and I had a spill. Oh. And lost everything because I had a bottle of cooking oil, so broke the flour, the rice, etc. The only thing that was saved were what we call the ground provisions, namely things like cassava and plantains. I picked as much as I could up and got to the little room where we lived, and my mother began to whip me with a fury I'd never experienced before. And I kept asking, why? And she said, my aunt said that she saw me turn into the yard and push the basket off the bicycle purposefully because I did not want to go.
Oh,
I was so upset.
of course, that is devastating for a young kid, especially
Well,
when you didn't do anything.
I didn't do anything, and this aunt had a habit of literally telling lies on me.
Mm.
And so I left and I decided to go and drown myself. And so I walked to, we lived probably about a mile or so from the Atlantic Ocean. And I walked and got to the seawall, stood in it. And then I became afraid. I could look at all these large boulders and the barnacles and the other things on it, and it was slimy. And I began thinking, what if I stepped down and, I didn't make it into the water? But I literally got afraid and decided not to do it.
Thank God for that.
Changed my life. Yeah, that actually changed my life.
Oh, and that's where, as I was mentioning about earlier, that it's so important to be kind. And her being your aunt, I mean, we don't know, what propelled her to do that. But that said, just think about the consequences your actions can have on others. It's one thing to just go thinking, oh, this is not going to have repercussions. I'm just doing a white lie, a small white lie. But think about it, like, what was the big consequence on your life? I'm grateful that you didn't take the action. What was going through your mind?
Well, all I kept thinking was drowning myself. And then, as I said, I became literally afraid. I was afraid that I would slip and get trapped between the boulders and never make it into the water and die that way. But I literally just chickened out and went
well, it's good. It's good.
It turned out to be good. But what it also did, I was going at the time to an evangelical church. And so I went 2 or 3 days later, actually the Sunday, to see the minister. And I told him I wanted to give my heart to the Lord. I wanted to be saved. And I did that because within the 2 days after this event, I had so many dark thoughts about what I would do to my aunt that I became afraid at how much I was in the dark side. Mm-hmm. And that really changed my life, because after that, I spent my time, in the church. I became what we would call at home a boy preacher, actually. After a while, I was able to go to high school, where I did very well because I became very focused on doing as best as I could for the Lord in a real sense. And so that absolutely changed my life and is responsible for the man I became, and I am.
So did minister have any part in your turnaround?
The minister, yes, because he was very happy and then began to give me a lot of opportunities to help him. And after a while, he would actually have me teach the younger kids in Sunday school. And then on the Saturday nights where we would go out to preach, he would preach. He began asking me to say a few words. And then after a while, I began to be what we call a boy preacher, and also to preach. What that did, as a matter of fact, it taught me basically how to speak publicly, without understanding it. That's what it taught me. It also gave me a tremendous memory, because I would memorize lots and lots of verses of the Bible in order to be able to preach. So it exercised my memory, and actually also helped me as a student.
What a story. And it teaches us that it's important to give a hand up. And
Yeah.
a little nudge for you turned around your whole life. So thinking from dark thoughts, you came on the positive side and achieved so much in your life. So how was it like growing up in Guyana?
Well, we were very poor circumstances. In fact, there were five of us, my mother and four siblings, and we lived in one room. And next in the room next to us was my aunt and her kids, and my grandmother and grandfather. So I spent actually a lot of my time outside, either sitting on the step or going to what we call the promenade gardens. It was only about 3 blocks away, but there I would do my homework because there were benches there and I could get my homework done. So that was the way I grew up until I was about 16. At 16, I won a scholarship to go to the top high school, to complete high school, at what is called Queen's College in Guyana, and did very well there, and started to work after I completed high school, actually as a school teacher, and was, I don't know how it came about, but I ended up being called by the U.S. Office one day, and they told me I was being offered a Fulbright scholarship to come to America and study engineering. So at age 20, I arrived in New York City on my way to Lehigh University to study engineering.
Mm. So what type of engineering did you study?
Chemical engineering. Actually, I started out doing chemical engineering, and then one semester I had what is called physical chemistry. And so I switched to chemistry. In fact, my PhD is in physical chemistry. I switched to chemistry in the engineering school. I just fell in love with physical chemistry.
Well, a lot of people may not like it. Definitely, you had a passion for it. So let's rewind back a little bit. So when you got that offer, when you got that call from the US, how did you feel, and what did your family, how did your family respond?
We were all very excited. I was waiting for scholarships to go to British universities. My performance in my last exam gave me admission to any of a number of British universities, but of course I had no money. The Fulbright scholarship offered not only a full scholarship, but I also got a small stipend to live on. And we were all excited at home because everybody was hoping I would get a scholarship to go away and study. My teachers all were delighted. It was also very important because with the stipend, I actually sent the stipend home to help my mother and brothers and sisters. And actually that is not an uncommon thing. It happens fairly frequently, not only with students who come from abroad, who come from poor families, but here in America, there are many Black American kids who are students and who are working part-time to help their family and brothers and sisters. So this is not uncommon. I thought it was an uncommon thing until I began, to myself to be a professor and to interact with the students, to realize that this is also, unfortunately, not uncommon in America for poor students.
So if you were sending your stipend, and if I may ask, how did you survive?
Well, it was very interesting. One, the canteen, my food, if you like, that was all taken care of. I did not have to pay for that. That was part of the scholarship. It was I got books, the tuition, the room, the residence was paid for, as well as food was paid for.
Mm-hmm.
So in a real sense, I didn't really have need for the money. And so I sent almost all of it home. This became actually, as I mentioned, this became an issue because one of the things that happened, I actually completed in 3 years. And one of the honors that I was given was I was invited to Phi Beta Kappa as well as Tau Beta Pi. Tau Beta Pi is the engineering honors. And I declined both. I had no idea what they really meant, but they required $25 each of them for the fee, and I got $50 a month. So which I sent home. I sent home about $40. So there's no way I could. So I politely declined. And I actually got a call from the dean, Dean Yates. I'll never forget. And he called me in and he said, "I've heard you've declined Phi Beta Kappa, and why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, it requires $25 and I don't have any money." He said, "But you get $50 a month. What are you doing with it?" So then I explained to him, I sent it home. And he looked at me and he said, "Here's what I'm going to do." He said, "Phi Beta Kappa is the more important of the two. I will pay the fee for your Phi Beta Kappa," which he did. And, so I'm Phi Beta Kappa.
Beautiful story. And here's again that if somebody invests in you, somebody is giving you a hand up, give somebody else a hand up. What a beautiful story. And see, like little things, when they add up, it becomes such a huge, huge change. And that's where I always promote kindness and sharing a little part of your time with somebody else, whether it's mentoring or just helping your family members out, wherever it is. So as you completed your chemical engineering, is that did you continue with your PhD at that time, or was it part of that?
Well, it was part of that. But before I go to that, if you don't mind, because it just triggered something in one of your shows that I heard that I thought was so beautiful. And in a way, it captures what you just said, but I'll say it in the words that you used then. You were talking about, in your interview, you were talking about walking and it was raining, and you talked about the sound of the rain, which was so poetic. But you talked about seeing this tiny little tree with the raindrops on the tree and the sun shining on those raindrops that made them look like diamonds. And then the rainbows that were there. Okay. And in a real sense, that captured the way I feel about individuals, I feel about people, is that, we are all diamonds in the rough, if you like. And as diamonds, when others give to us and shine on us, then there's an opportunity for all the beautiful things within us, the rainbow of gifts that we have to come. And I so loved listening to you say that, because it gave me this wonderful image of what I think about people. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing that, because I still remember that moment to this day. It was just beautiful, and we learned so much from nature. We have treasures all around us, and we forget about that. So tell us about your journey through PhD.
My journey to PhD was an interesting one. My journey in those 3 years that I spent at Lehigh was where I discovered discrimination and racism. But as I mentioned in the case of Dean Yates, is where I also discovered that there were wonderful people, in spite of what. So I had the unfortunate situation of at least 2 professors who gave me lower grades than I had earned. But then I'm going to tell you about the professor who probably changed my life. I was in my third year, and Professor Dean was his name. I was taking a course from him. It actually was a graduate level course. And he called me into his office. And he said, tell me about yourself. And, no one had ever asked me that. And so I did. And I told him of my religious background, etc. And he said to me, he says, I understand that because I am Jewish, so I understand the importance of religion. And then he said to me, do you know you have enough hours to graduate? And I didn't know. I said, no. He said, yes, you do. And as a matter of fact, we've been discussing it. And one possibility is that we do put you into a 6-year PhD, which we are sort of thinking that we might want to start, and you would be the first person in it. He says, but I think you are at a stage in your life where you are searching for yourself. And my advice to you is that you go to another institution and do graduate work. And so he helped me apply. He actually called up a number of universities, got interviews for me. And then when I returned off of my road trip, I sat with him to decide. And I actually was lucky. I was accepted by all of them. And he recommended that I go to Cornell. And he did it. It turned out for all the right reasons. And he said, not because that's where he got his PhD, but I was at that stage of my life that Cornell was just the right place. It was in the 60s. He said, it is the campus. You will find political activity. You will find people talking about philosophy. And you will find in your chemistry department professors who are very focused on chemistry and want to be sure that you're the best chemist that there could ever be. He was absolutely correct. I went to Cornell, did my PhD in physical chemistry. And in fact, it's one of the two places I identify as having been important in my maturation as a human being, was indeed those years I spent doing my PhD at Cornell. That's one of the times.
Oh, what a beautiful story, and how a person, as you mentioned, created that rainbow for you.
Yes.
And did you, right after your PhD, did you go for a first job, or what transpired after that?
Well, interestingly enough, I did. Even though my professors wanted me to stay and do a fellowship, because the thesis I had done turned out to be very interesting and exciting. It was one of those times where what I had uncovered was the first time that it had been seen. And so they were all excited, but I had had a job at Xerox. And so I went to work for Xerox. And that was another life-changing experience. I was there 18 months. And,
so you have mentioned in that, you reframed your mindset in your first job. So tell us about that as well.
That's indeed where my life was reframed in a real sense. I was there for 3 months and could not get a good project. I would go and ask my boss. He would give me one excuse after another. And one day, a white young man joined the group. And he had not even completed his PhD. And within 1 week, he was actually placed on the hottest project that we had at Xerox at the time in research and development. And so I went to my boss and I asked the usual question, and he gave me the usual excuses. And then I said to him, look, Steve, think of me not as though I'm Frank. Think of me as though I'm Bob. And I was astounded to see sort of the recognition come over his face And he looked at me and he said, Bob has only been here a week and I've put him on the Ardrey. That was the big project, the Ardrey project. I was so angry. I ran out of his office, ran into the office of the senior vice president to give him another example of where I was being discriminated against. Now, and that is what actually caused me to leave industry and to go to a medical school. So I also have an MD. 2 or 3 years later, I thought about that incident and realized that I had missed 2 things that were very important. One, Dr. Tribus, the senior vice president, had insisted on Xerox hiring young Black PhDs because at the time there was only 1 Black PhD in all of research and development at Xerox. And that summer, he had hired 3 of us. So in a real sense, it was probably more important to him that Frank Douglas would do well than it was to Frank Douglas because his reputation was on the line.
Right.
The second thing was that my desired outcome was to get a good project because I wanted to demonstrate what I had learned in my PhD and how good I was. That was my desired outcome. It was not for the senior vice president to go and have tough words with my boss. So had I reframed and had I said to the senior vice president, Dr. Tribus, could you help my boss find me a good project? I retired from Xerox because one, that was within his sphere of influence to achieve. And secondly, that was my desired outcome. When I was writing my memoirs, which I released in November 2018, it occurred to me when I was faced with difficulties, I actually reframed. And that is why, actually, it's the title of my recently released book, which talks about addressing systemic discrimination by reframing the problem. So reframing became for me, as I said, I didn't realize it until I was writing my memoirs, and suddenly it struck me how important reframing is.
Yeah, that is so powerful that you had that self-realization. So this is a difficult conversation to have, and yet it's important to touch upon it. So many people face discrimination, and discrimination comes in so many different phases that there is no one particular phase. It can be gender, it can be age, it can be color, it can be bias, it could even just be, let's say somebody from South is going to New York, or somebody from New York is coming to the South. Oh, those Yankees, or those, people from South, or from Florida, or from those Texans. And we have so many biases. So a lot of people, and I think so, everyone faces some sort of discrimination once or twice in their lives. I've experienced it multiple times. So you talked about reframing. So first of all, walk us through your process. Like, what did you do? Like, did you face anything else during medical school? And how did you handle that?
I faced many things during medical school, which is unfortunate. Because I thought in a real sense, this is the study of medicine, understand human beings. But at the time, it was the early days when predominantly white institutions were beginning to admit underrepresented minorities into the institutions. So what I found when I got to medical school is that there seemed to have been a practice every year. They had at the time, there were about 8 to 10 Black students who were there in the class of 100, so about 8 to 10%. And there seemed to have been a practice every year of having one or two of those students repeat the first year. Now, having been a graduate student, having been a graduate assistant and evaluated students, etc., I sort of, had been at least gotten some training to be able to assess the capability of students. I felt that there's something unfair going on here. The fascinating thing, actually, that happened is that some of the boys, I'll say boys, you're young men, some of the let's say male students felt that some of the female students were getting higher grades than they should get because the male professors liked them. And they were upset about it. So I went to one of them whom I knew very well. And I said, why don't you and, some of the other guys go and ask to have anonymous grading? He thought that was a good idea. So we had anonymous grading. And there's still anonymous grading at that institution. And I'll tell you what happened the first time we had anonymous grading. One of my Black female colleagues, it was honors pass-fail system. At that time, as far as I knew, no Blacks had ever gotten honors. One of my Black colleagues, female colleagues, got 3 out of 4 honors. Yours truly got 2 out of 4 honors, and not a single Black student failed. Not a single Black student failed.
Let's go back to the process. What did you do over here that changed the whole trajectory?
With respect to the
just like you asked them to have anonymous. So again, it goes back to addressing the problem.
Yes, we reframe the problem. Rather than dealing with the problem that Black students were being unfairly treated, is we reframed it into, let's have a process in which all students feel they are being treated fairly. Okay? And that came up with a different outcome. Okay.
And that addressed
the outcome that we wanted in a real sense. Okay.
Right.
Outcome that we wanted was that the Black students should not be failed if indeed, they had actually performed well. That was the outcome we wanted. But rather than addressing that, we reframed it to all students should feel that they're being treated fairly. And that way we got the outcome.
And that could have addressed females regardless of the color.
Regardless of the color, it addressed females because, as I said, my female colleague who's Black got 3 out of 4 honors. Which means that although she had never failed any courses at that point, she was nonetheless not getting her, her due. She was not being recognized.
So how did you come up with that address the problem and reframe it?
Well, as I said, as I was doing my memoirs, and I began to look not only at different problems that I had, also in industry. Actually, I ended up, I was an academic physician for a short while, and then I went to work, went back and worked for industry, went to work for a pharmaceutical company, and experienced racism there. The worst one of which was there was a time, well, there were 2 critical times, but I'll just tell you the second one. I was expected to become the global head of research and development of a large pharmaceutical company. And it was denied it because of my ethnicity. Okay. So I had to reframe. Actually, what I did is I left and I went to a smaller company, which, as luck would have it, a very large company in Germany actually bought the small company and then turned to me to become the global head of research and development. So I ended up getting the position in a similarly sized global company that I was denied 2 or 3 years before.
So one of the key points that I want to touch upon is that you did say that, especially after leaving Xerox, it helped you reframe the problem, and you still kept on facing the problem. You kept on facing the obstacles. So there are a lot of people who may say that, I'm emotionally hurt, or that hurt is there. How can they heal themselves and reframe the problem? So then what they're doing is changing the outcome by reframing the situation.
Yeah. No, this is so very important because, what we sometimes fail to realize, it's the pain that people are feeling. And in fact, one of the things that I have done is to say, let us focus on the individual. So if we have an individual who has been aggrieved, the first thing we do with that individual, and your question you'd asked earlier, so I'll answer your question more directly now, is the first thing we do is we have that individual fill out a form, which is just 2 pages, which asks them to state what is their desired outcome, 1-2 sentences, to describe the problem they're having, the situation, in bullet form. Because we want them to start stepping back from the emotion, the hurt that is there. Just step back. Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And then describe the environment that they're in, again in bullet form, and then very simply state what they think the problem is. So that's the intake form. We have a panel, and we call our panel VIPs, victors in overcoming injustice in their profession. So these are individuals who are professionals who have faced discrimination and have dealt with it, have overcome. And so that panel then listens to the case, let's call it the case of this aggrieved individual. And they do it from 2 perspectives. One, they try to understand from that case, what are the issues around equity? And we monitor it very simply. Are there privileged groups? Are there processes in place where someone could make a complaint without fear of retribution? And what are the prospects for that individual? Very simple. Issues around inclusion. Now, it's sometimes difficult for people to tell you whether they've been included or not, but they know when they're excluded. So we look at the microaggressions, microassaults, microinsults, microinvalidations. And after we've heard that, we actually plot a little matrix of equity versus inclusion, because when you do that, you can actually identify 4 types of environments or cultures, we call them. If a situation is one in which equity is high, inclusion is high, we call that a psychologically safe culture. If equity is low and inclusion is low, that is a toxic culture, psychologically toxic culture. So you can do these 4 cultures. Now, once you have that and you identify in which quadrant or culture an individual is, then you ask yourself the question, and this is where you come to reframing. Given the desired outcome and given where they're sitting, what's a better problem to solve to get to that desired outcome? Is it, if we look at inclusion, are there opportunities there? Or if we look at equity? And so we then have that discussion of trying to find a better problem to solve. And once you find a better problem to solve, you now have reframed the problem. And then we discuss with the individual, now, what is the dialogue? What's the discussion you would have with the supervisor, with the boss? So rather than the supervisor, the boss feeling defensive, you're now coming with a problem amongst which is this characteristic. It's a problem which if it were solved, not only would the aggrieved person benefit, but others in the work unit would benefit. Go back to the medical school example. So we look for such problems. And invariably, what I have found in my experience, invariably, if you're in an environment where discrimination is occurring, as you said, whether it's to women, whether it's because of the culture, whether it's because of religion, if that is occurring, you can be sure there are others who are also experiencing other types of discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So because of my observation of that over many years, I am convinced that you will be able to find a better problem to solve that has that characteristic. And then we reframe. So that's the process which we use.
So powerful. Because what's a better problem to solve? It definitely resonates with me, because what you're doing is at the core of humanity, you are saying that let's bring inclusion in. When you're solving the problem for everyone, the odds of it succeeding and you achieving that outcome are so much more greater than just being focused on yourself or one thing. So that is so powerful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Frank. Just amazing. And share with us about your memoir and where people can find you. How can they connect with you?
Well, you can connect with me through frankdouglasbooks.com. That's my website, frankdouglasbooks.com. You'll find both books there. But there's a contact form there. Just send me a note and an email. I'll respond to you. The books are both on Amazon also. You can get it from my website, but you can also get them on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
So tell us about your books.
The first one actually is interesting. It's called Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Why a free man from a black stream? It turns out, and in the book, I tell how I discovered that, because I didn't know that. But it turns out that Frank, my first name, is Celtic in origin and means free man. And Douglas is Scottish and means from a black stream.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, wow.
So the book is the
odds?
defining moments in my life. So it's defining moments of free man from a black stream.
Oh,
And you'll find some of the things sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you find some of the things that I just mentioned, like the Xerox, the medical school. The first question you asked me about my upbringing, you'll find them all in that book, my memoirs.
Memoir and
the second,
go ahead.
Just released. Yeah, that is entitled "Addressing Systemic Discrimination by Reframing the Problem."
Well, definitely sounds a book. Anybody could benefit from it. So
that's what I'm hearing, actually. The book is actually, it's only 170 pages or so. I particularly wanted it to be small, sort of a primer. And the first section of it describes the methodology, describes why the importance of looking at equity and inclusion and the methodology of reframing. In the second part of the book are 18 cases, individuals whom I interviewed and whom we took through the process in the intake form, and then to go through inclusion, equity, the matrix, etc., and to find a better problem to solve. So in reading the book, it's actually very easy. You read the first part, which is only 24, 25 pages, read the very first case, which is actually a combination of two cases, which we use as a teaching case, and you see how the process works. And then you can pick and choose, go to the table of contents and pick and choose cases to read, because you find cases involving physicians, involving government workers, involving people in industry, involving people in academia. So it covers a breadth.
Definitely sounds like a good read. and a book to definitely have it on your shelf or on your Kindle or your note, like whatever you're using. And thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart and wonderful nuggets. So what's next for you?
Well, right now we are focusing on getting not just the book such into hands of individuals, but really encouraging individuals to contact us, individuals whose well-being is being affected, be it at work or elsewhere, whom we can help by taking them through the reframing process. So right now, that's a major focus.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for doing all the good work that you're doing for people, because it's so critical that we help each other out, be kind to each other. So thank you for joining us. It was an honor having you on the show.
Well, thank you very much. And if I may end, because of something else which you said in one of your shows, you talked about honoring people. And again, it resonated with me because for me, if in your organization you treat people fairly, you're honoring them. And if you value them by including their contributions and recognizing them. So this, when I heard you talk about honoring people, again, it struck a chord with me. Thank you for this opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. It was really an honor to have this conversation. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And I'm always learning from our guests. And it's a privilege to speak with these wonderful people, wonderful experts. So please know that you are the life and blood and the soul of our show. So reach out to us, how we can support you, who we can bring, so you get to live the life you deserve, and with joy and with good health. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. And we will see you next time. Be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.